Why the worst people often rise to the top. Darwinism. Have you ever looked around at politics, at business, at history, and wondered why do the most ruthless, selfish, and morally bankrupt individuals so often end up in power? It's a question that haunts us because we want to believe the world is fair. That kindness prevails, that justice is natural. But when we open our eyes, when we really observe the systems we live in, we're forced to confront a darker truth. The game of survival doesn't always reward the best people. In fact, quite often it does the opposite. And this isn't a glitch in the system, it might be the system. We're going to dive deep into this idea. Not just as a social critique, but as a philosophical journey. We'll walk through the terrain of Darwinism, not just as biology, but as a lens for understanding power, morality, and human behavior. Because what Darwin said about evolution, about survival of the fittest, wasn't just about animals in the wild. It was about systems, environments, conditions that favor certain traits over others. And if we apply that to human civilization, to corporate ladders, to political empires, we have to ask what traits are actually being selected for. Let's start with the base idea: evolution doesn't reward goodness. It rewards fitness, which is not about being strong or smart. It's about being adapted to the current environment. So if the environment favors aggression, manipulation, or deception, then those traits will rise. If it rewards empathy, collaboration, or honesty, then those will. But here's the uncomfortable question: what kind of environment have we created?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Look at corporate structures, look at politics, look at social media. These are not neutral platforms, they are ecosystems. And just like in nature, certain traits are rewarded. In many cases, it's not kindness or wisdom that gets you promoted. It's confidence. It's the ability to dominate a room, to take credit, to spin failure into success. In politics, it's not vision or compassion that wins elections. It's charisma, manipulation, and sometimes outright lies. This isn't a conspiracy. It's an evolutionary consequence of the systems we've built. If the system rewards power over truth, then the most powerful will often be the least honest. Darwin's theory never said the best survive. It said the fittest do, and fitness can be horrifyingly immoral. A virus is fit if it spreads efficiently, even if it kills its host. A predator is fit if it dominates weaker prey. Translate that to humans, and the same logic applies. If the societal environment rewards selfishness, then the selfish rise. If corruption is more efficient than integrity, then corruption becomes an evolutionary advantage. But here's where things get even more disturbing. Because we, as a species, have the unique ability to build our environment. And yet, we keep designing systems that reward behaviors we claim to hate. We say we want honesty, but we reward those who market better lies. We say we value integrity, but we vote for whoever confirms our biases. We say we love humility, but we promote those who scream the loudest. Why? Is it possible that we're addicted to the very traits we claim to despise? We are not just victims of the system, but its architects. That somewhere deep inside we admire dominance more than decency because dominance feels like strength. This is where the philosophical conflict begins. Because if Darwinian logic applies to human systems, and it clearly does, then we have to confront something even more unsettling, that moral virtue is not inherently advantageous. That being good might actually be a liability in a world designed to reward the opposite. And yet, we revere goodness. We write books about it. We raise children to believe in it. So what's going on here? Are we living in a moral contradiction? Are we trying to uphold values that are actively selected against by the very structures we participate in? And if so, what does that say about us? Let me ask you something. Would you rather be good and forgotten or ruthless and remembered? That question isn't hypothetical. It's existential. because it forces you to pick between two survival strategies, one that aligns with your values and one that aligns with the system's incentives. And most of us are torn between them. We want to do the right thing, but we also want to win. We want to be ethical, but we want to succeed. And in many environments, those two desires are in direct conflict. So, how do we resolve this? Do we adapt to the system, become cunning, play the game, and rationalize it later? Or do we resist the system, risk irrelevance, and hope that integrity is enough? This is where Darwin alone can't help us, because evolution explains what is, not what should be. And that's the philosophical line we must walk. We can't change what the system rewards unless we first understand it. Unless we ask not just why the worst rise, but why we let them. So the next time you see someone rise to power and think, how did they get there? Don't just blame the person. Blame the rules of the game. Blame the incentives. Then ask yourself, what kind of system would reward the best of us instead of the worst? And what would it take to build it? The predator's advantage, why ruthlessness works, and what that means for the rest of us. To understand why the worst people often rise to the top. We must go deeper into the mechanics of human systems and the logic of evolution. Darwinism doesn't play favorites with morality. It doesn't care about fairness, kindness, or justice. It cares about survival and replication. And in the environments we've created, corporate boardrooms, political arenas, digital platforms, the traits that help someone survive and rise to the top are often the ones we associate with predators. Not literal ones, but psychological predators, those who manipulate, dominate, deceive, and exploit. These traits, we must admit, are adaptive. They work. And that's the part that should concern us most. Let's break this down. In the wild, a predator doesn't rise to the top because it's evil. It rises because it's effective. It knows how to read the environment, to detect weakness, to act decisively, and to take what it needs without hesitation. Now apply that to a modern workplace. Who gets ahead? Often it's not the most competent person, but the one who knows how to appear competent. It's not the kindest, but the most politically savvy. The person who knows how to smile while cutting others down, how to take credit when things go well and shift blame when they don't. In a system where perception outweighs substance, ruthlessness becomes a skill set. This isn't just theoretical, it's observable. Research in organizational behavior has shown that narcissists and sociopaths are disproportionately represented in top leadership roles. Why? Because they possess traits that the system rewards: confidence without self-doubt, charm without empathy, decisiveness without hesitation. These aren't flaws in the system, they're features, and that's what makes the predator's advantage so dangerous. It's self-reinforcing. The higher you go, the more those traits are validated, the more the system adapts to support them, and the more the genuinely ethical are squeezed out. But here's where it gets even darker. Once predators rise, they reshape the environment to suit their nature. They build systems that protect their power, that punish dissent, that reward loyalty over honesty. In essence, they terraform the psychological landscape around them to ensure their continued dominance. This is why bad leadership is so hard to dislodge, not because it's secretly competent, but because it rewires the system to make alternatives seem impossible. And yet the rest of us participate. We play along, we flatter the powerful, we silence our integrity, we rationalize our compromises. Why? Because we fear being devoured. Because we've internalized the idea that to be good is to be weak. That to be ethical is to be expendable. And so we adapt. We twist ourselves into shapes that fit the system, even as we resent it. But every time we do, we reinforce the very dynamics we claim to hate. So what are we supposed to do? Should we become predators too? Should we abandon our values in the name of survival? That's the existential dilemma. Because Darwinism doesn't offer moral guidance, It tells us how traits propagate, not whether they should. It's descriptive, not prescriptive. But we are not just animals, we are conscious beings. We can reflect, choose, build, and that's what sets us apart. The predator's advantage works, but only in systems that lack conscious design. And we are capable of designing better. But we have to start from a place of brutal honesty. We must admit that ruthlessness works in our systems. That's the first step. Then we must ask, what would a system look like that selects for wisdom instead of manipulation? For humility instead of arrogance? For collaboration instead of domination? It would look radically different from what we have now. It would demand new incentives, new metrics of success, new cultural values. It would mean valuing depth over speed, truth over performance, service over status. And that's not easy. Because systems don't change on ideals alone, they change on pressure, on awareness, on collective refusal to play the old game. And here's where the real challenge lies. Most of us are waiting for someone else to change the system. But the system is us. It's our attention, our votes, our money, our silence, our applause. Every time we celebrate a manipulator because they get results, we reinforce the predator's advantage. Every time we dismiss a kind person as too soft for leadership, we drive another nail into the coffin of virtue. So ask yourself, what are you rewarding in your own life? Who are you giving your loyalty to? Your admiration? Your trust? Because the predator doesn't rise alone. It rises on the shoulders of those who look away. And yet, there's hope. Because just as environments can evolve to favor predators, they can also evolve to favor protectors, creators, truth tellers. But it won't happen by accident. It will happen only if we choose to make it happen by refusing to play the game as it is and imagining something better. The moral cost of adaptation. When survival means losing your soul, there's a quiet war happening inside each of us, a war between the desire to stay true to our values and the pressure to adapt to a world that often punishes them. It's subtle. It doesn't roar, it whispers. It creeps into our decisions, our compromises, our silence. And before we know it, we're no longer asking what's right. But what works? That shift seemingly small is where the soul begins to erode. Because adaptation, while necessary for survival, becomes dangerous when it forces us to trade authenticity for acceptance, integrity for influence, and meaning for momentum. Let's be brutally honest. In many environments today, being moral feels like a handicap. If you speak the truth, you risk alienation. If you call out injustice, you risk retaliation. If you act with compassion, you risk being seen as weak. So we adapt, we put on masks, we learn to speak in coded language, to nod when we should protest, to stay silent when we should scream. We learn the art of self-preservation. But the question is, at what cost? Every time we suppress a part of ourselves to fit in, we lose a piece of our soul's alignment. And the tragedy is, we rarely notice it happening. We call it being professional, playing the game, being strategic. But deep down, something in us knows we're drifting. Drifting from the person we wanted to be. Drifting from the values we once held sacred. And the longer we drift, the harder it becomes to remember what it felt like to live in truth. This is the moral cost of adaptation. It's not immediate, it's cumulative. It builds slowly like corrosion on metal. One compromise becomes two. One silence becomes a pattern. One lie becomes a lifestyle. And before long, we look in the mirror and see someone we don't fully recognize, someone successful perhaps, but hollow. Someone respected, but restless. Because we can climb the ladder, win the game, earn the applause, and still feel empty. Why? Because success without alignment is just another form of failure. And here's the paradox. The very systems that reward the worst traits also demand our best performances. They want our energy, our loyalty, our creativity, but not our truth. They want our output, not our authenticity. And so we become performers in a theater where the script is written by fear, not by purpose. We become efficient machines, not mindful beings. And somewhere along the way, the question of who we are gets lost in the noise of what we do. But let's pause here, because this isn't about despair, it's about awakening. We need to ask ourselves, what does it mean to survive in a system that punishes virtue? And is survival the highest goal? Darwinism tells us that survival is everything. But philosophy reminds us that survival without meaning is just existence. That we are not only biological creatures, we are moral ones. And sometimes the most powerful act is not to adapt, but to resist. Resistance doesn't always look like revolution. Sometimes it's as simple as telling the truth in a room full of lies. Sometimes it's choosing not to laugh at the cruel joke. Sometimes it's refusing to step on someone else to get ahead. These moments might seem small, but they are acts of rebellion in a world that treats conscience like a liability. And every act of moral courage sends a signal, however faint, that another way is possible. But make no mistake, there is a cost. To live with integrity in a corrupt system is to walk through fire. You may be misunderstood, you may lose opportunities, you may watch others rise while you remain in the shadows. But what you gain is something no external reward can offer: the ability to live with yourself, to look in the mirror and see someone you respect. That is a kind of success that can't be measured in followers, promotions, or likes. It's measured in peace. Now ask yourself, what are you willing to lose to remain yourself? That's not a rhetorical question, it's the heart of the moral life. Because staying true doesn't mean staying safe. It means choosing alignment over advantage. It means accepting that in some games, the only way to win is not to play. It means recognizing that the system may never reward your integrity, but your soul will. And this brings us to a deeper truth that the real battle isn't out there in the world of politics or corporations or institutions. It's inside. It's between the part of you that wants to belong and the part that wants to be free. Between the part that wants to win and the part that wants to be whole. And every day, in ways big and small, you are choosing which part gets stronger. So the next time you feel the pressure to adapt at the cost of your truth, pause. Ask yourself, is this who I want to become? Is this the price I'm willing to pay? Because the world may reward performance, but your soul only responds to honesty. And at the end of it all, when the titles fade and the applause stops, the only thing that will matter is whether you remain yours, rewriting the game, how we build systems that reward goodness instead of greed if we've learned anything. It's that the world as we've built it often selects for traits that are efficient but not ethical. Ruthlessness, manipulation, charm, without substance, these qualities rise to the top. Not because they're admirable, but because they're useful in systems that value short-term gain over long-term integrity. But if we can build systems that reward greed, we can also build systems that reward goodness. The question is how? First, we must confront a hard truth: systems don't change because we wish them to. They change because we design them to. That means recognizing our role not only as participants, but as architects. Every workplace culture, every social norm, every political structure is shaped by human decisions. It's easy to believe that the system is some distant, immovable force, but in reality, it's a mirror of collective choices, ours included. So we start small, we start with incentives. What you reward, you repeat. If a company only celebrates quarterly profits and ignores how those profits are made, it will breed unethical behavior. But if it rewards transparency, collaboration, and long-term thinking, it begins to shift the evolutionary advantage. The same goes for schools, governments, even online platforms. When we create feedback loops that elevate ethical behavior, empathy, and truth-telling, we make those traits adaptive. We make goodness pragmatic. But it's not just about changing rules, it's about changing culture. Culture is the invisible operating system beneath every institution. It tells people what's really valued beyond the slogans and mission statements. If we want to reward goodness, we have to make it visible, respected, and powerful. That means recognizing those who do the right thing, even when it costs them. It means telling different stories where integrity wins, not just ambition. Because what we celebrate, we emulate. And we must also reimagine leadership. For too long, we've conflated dominance with strength, charisma with competence. But real leadership is not about being loud or feared. It's about being clear, accountable, and grounded in values. The leaders we need are not the ones who play the system best, but the ones who challenge it most. And those leaders won't rise unless we back them, believe in them, and become them. Still, for all this to work, we need something deeper than policy. We need inner transformation. Systems reflect the psychology of the people within them. If we are driven by fear, ego, and scarcity, we will build systems that mirror those traits. But if we cultivate self-awareness, compassion, and purpose, we will naturally build systems that reflect those values. The outer revolution begins with an inner one. So ask yourself, what am I contributing to the systems I'm part of? Not just with your work, but with your silence, your purchases, your attention, your trust. Every small decision is a vote for the kind of world we want to live in. You don't need to be in charge to lead. You lead by the way you show up, by what you tolerate, by what you speak up for when it's risky and inconvenient. We may not be able to change everything overnight, but we can create pockets of resistance, places where goodness has a chance to grow. And over time, those pockets can become networks. Those networks can become movements. And those movements can shift the momentum of history. Because in the end, Darwin was right, the fittest survive. But we decide what fitness means. We decide what traits our world selects for. And if we want a future where the worst don't always rise to the top, we must stop waiting for better systems, we must build them. And that begins with one simple, radical idea: goodness is not weakness. It's the foundation of everything worth creating.